Hola, ¿qué tal? Aquí Julio Monroy desde Delta Records en Bogotá, Colombia. Hoy tenemos una invitada muy especial, ha mezclado para TV, cine, bueno, mejor dicho, nos va a hablar todo sobre el audio para cine, televisión, video. Y bueno, este live va a ser en inglés, entonces pues aquí vamos. Hey Sherry, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you for accepting the invitation, Sherry.
It's my pleasure.
Oh, thanks a lot. And we are with David Sicard. Hey, David, how are you?
Hello everyone, how are you? Welcome to this new episode of Produciendo con Julio Monroy. Well, it's an honor to have you here. Thank you a lot for taking the time to do this with us. There's actually Lolita, the dog. Lolita, the dog of the studio, is here with us as well. So for the people watching, remember that you can actually send us questions through the platform on which you are watching, and I will communicate them to both Julio and Sherry. I leave you with the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, David, and thank you, Lolita. Amazing. We practice that with Lolita. She's training. training. Okay, Sherry. We have like only two mandatory questions here
Okay.
in the live stream, and this is the first. And
Okay.
Sherry, can you tell us how did you begin in this audio music industry, video, movies world? Tell.
It's a long story, but I'll try to cut to the chase in a few areas. I started out as a musician. That was my goal. That was what I wanted to do when I was younger, was go to college and study music, play music whenever I could possibly do it. And that was it. It was just, music. And the first college I went to was Webster College in St. Louis, Missouri, and I studied classical counterpoint and fugue. And after about 6 months of that, I left there and applied to Berklee College of Music in Boston, which was more of a jazz school, and that's more what I was interested in. So I hitchhiked cross country for 6 months and then moved to Boston and went to Berkeley and did 4 semesters. I think I was going into my fifth semester. And for some reason, and I understand it even more so now, but for some reason, I learned so much theory and I was so good at it that I stopped being able to create. I felt like I could no longer create anything. Everything was a musical composition in my head. I could analyze anything. I could I just couldn't create anymore. And I turned to a friend of mine who was sitting in a harmony class that I was in. And I said, if I get an A on this paper, on this piece, I'm leaving. And he said, why? But you're doing so well. And I said, because I'm not creating anything and this is crap. And I got an A minus. And so I decided to quit. So I went to the dean and quit and told some of my professors that I was going to quit. And they were very surprised at one point because they said, you have so much talent, you really shouldn't leave. And I said, I'm not creating anything that I consider to be good, so I'm going to go see what's out there. And I had decided I would go take some classes at Boston School of Electronic Music, which was just then getting into ARP 2600s and Moog synthesizers. And that was the time of all that really emerging. And I got very much into sound and audio and learning about it. And so I got a job at a recording studio. Now, at the same time, there was a place called Orson Welles Film School, run by Wayne Wadhams and Bill Gitt, who eventually built the studios at Berklee School of Music, Berklee University now. There was also, while I was at Berklee, there was a little 2-track studio in the basement. And one day I was given the assignment, or our class was given the assignment, to have a chart that we made recorded in that studio. And while I was down there and it was my own piece that was being recorded, I sort of had this aha moment where I went, oh my God, this is so cool what they're doing, the manipulation of sound. And I mean, this was a small studio. It was a 2-track studio. The faders were rotary pots. They weren't faders, but it fascinated me. So I kind of wanted more. And at Orson Welles Film School under Bill and Wayne, it was an 16-track studio. And everybody in the class were musicians and just wanted their demos done. I was the only one that was really interested in sound. So I got to record all their demos and all their songs and really utilize the class, and then got a job at a local recording studio where the boss told me, women don't belong in the studio. So you'll be my assistant down here. And when I left Berkeley, one of my teachers told me something it always stuck in my head. He said, Sherry, can you type? And I said, no. And he said, don't ever learn to type. If you learn to type, they're going to stick you in an office in the back, because that's what they do with women these days in recording studios.
And let me ask you that question. We are talking about which year?
We're talking about the early 70s.
Okay. So he
Okay.
said that if you type,
He said that to me, and that was said when I quit. He asked me, because I told him I was interested in audio. I wanted to learn more about audio. And he said, that's going to be really difficult, especially because you're a woman. So he said, do you know how to type? And I said, no, I was going to take it next semester. He said, don't ever learn to type.
yeah.
And that was one of the truest things he ever told me, because when I got the job at the studio, and when the owner said, no, there is no way you're going to end up in the studio, but I need somebody to assist me. And I said to him, but I can't type. And he said, oh, that's okay. We'll teach you how to edit tape, because we do a lot of children's records. And there's a lot of other things that you can do. We have a secretary, she can type.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I was like, okay, deal. And luckily, the guy who was the engineer knew what my aspirations were and knew about Orson Welles Film School and what I was trying to do. So at night, when everybody went home and he would still be up in the studio mixing or working, he kind of took me on and showed me stuff. So between that and the classes I was doing with Wayne and Bell, I got a really good overview. And he basically at one point said to me, one day, somehow it's going to happen, but there's going to be a room full of musicians and I'm not going to be able to get to the studio. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, this was after almost a year. He said, you know enough to be able to set up a session, set up the mics and the cables. I've taught you basic mixing. You've learned a lot from Bill and Wayne. You'll be ready. And I took that with a grain of salt. But 4 months later, there was a humongous snowstorm in Boston, and we had a room full of studio musicians that they were paying, and they were paying the union hours, and he couldn't get in. He was snowed in. His car was completely snowed in. I went there earlier, of course, and so I was able to get there by the trains. He called up the boss and told him, let Sherry start the session. And he freaked out and he went, what are you talking about? He said, she knows enough. I've trained her. And he said, what are you talking about? I've trained her at night. She knows enough. Let her start the session. Everything is set up from the night before because she helped me set it up. She just has to run the first couple of songs. I'll get there. So it was sort of trial by fire. I had all these musicians, but everything was set up. I had to get the levels, had to make sure everything was happening. And I did. I did what I had to do. And when he came in, the boss was kind of fuming, but all I can say is I got through the first 2 songs, and then the engineer took over and he looked at me and he put his thumbs up, and that was that. Now there was an assistant engineer's job open, which my boss would not give me. But after that, we went up to him and said, now will you give her the assistant's job? And he said, okay, but you're going to take a cut in pay, and if you screw up once, you're fired. And I said, deal. So that was my first job in the recording studio. And one night, a couple of guys came in and to do some wiring, and we were sitting around getting very high. And I told them what I wanted to do and where I'd been taking classes and with who. And they said, well, we're building a studio. Why don't you come join us? And I said, okay. And then I left that studio and went with these guys to build a studio.
Wow.
And we actually, I mean, it was a funny story because this studio was in Boston It was a 24 track. We went out to California to check out all these studios. And we went to the record plant, we went to Hyder's in San Francisco, we went all over, Alembic Studios, met all kinds of great people. And we were figuring out all the gear that we wanted to get. And then halfway through the trip, we found out that two of our backers had pulled out. So we were minus like almost 2/3 of our money. So we had to start scrambling and figuring things out, which could have destroyed everything, but instead it made it one of the best experiences because I had to learn to think out of the box.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we built a shell within a shell that sank in the first 6 months.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, one of my partners and I were like sitting down. Well, it was very late at night. We were getting high and we were listening to music coming through the speakers. And then all of a sudden we felt this, we were laying on the floor and we felt this rumble. We were in the drum booth. And he looked at me and I went, oh my God. And I looked at him and we both kind of looked at each other and went, we've coupled, meaning that we sank. The shell that we built upon the other shell for isolation sank. So there was a whole different situation that arose. When we were wiring, there was like a 6-inch crawl space up above, and I was the smallest one. So in 90-degree Boston heat, I went up to do the wiring and the fiberglass and everything. I learned all kinds of crazy things. We had, you know, to use, I've told this story before, but for a digital delay, we had a basement. We would put a bidirectional mic to catch the bounces off of things.
That's amazing.
And then bring that up top. So that was my first delay. And then we had like Hammond springs, which were under the console. And to cut the decay time, fiberglass pieces we'd put on it. I mean, and if you kicked it, it was like, whoo, loud. But the cool thing was just learning how to use the fiberglass to get the decay time that you wanted on the spring reverbs.
That's amazing.
We had John Miller, who was our techie guy. I mean, our console was all rotary pots for the first year or so until somebody else joined us. But we wanted a counter on the machine, so he used a bicycle chain, and we had a little analog reader, and the bicycle chain we'd hear it as we'd go back. It sounded like an airplane was going off, but we had our counter until it stopped working and we went over something. But there were all kinds of things like that I had to think outside of the box with. I had to learn. Oh, Jesus. Sorry.
It's okay. Don't worry. It's fascinating, all the things that you have said, because yeah, learning how to do or create the sounds or the things that now you can like open a plugin and change everything in a delay, and you know how to create it in an environment, in a room. That's amazing.
And so that was the beginning.
Yeah.
I mean, and all the years before that, I was a musician. You know, I was from when I was a kid and taking music lessons and guitar playing lessons in Manhattan. That's a whole nother history story. But when I joined these guys, I got such an education because both Don and John had their own studios beforehand, and they taught me so well. So I became an engineer there. And one of the wonderful things was because I went to Berkeley, I knew most of the musicians in town, and they trusted me with their music and with themselves, basically. So that was my recording engineer days in Boston. And I have to get rid of this. I turned it off on my phone, but I didn't realize my computer would grab it. Sorry.
Yeah. Don't worry. It's okay.
I'll just text her in a meeting.
Yeah, don't worry. Don't
Okay,
worry.
so
Hey, David, what do you think about all the things that Sherry told us?
That's amazing. It's amazing everything that you have done, everything that you have constructed, and I'm sure it's a really important thing for opening the way to other women to dedicate to this, and I think it's amazing, and I think you're really talented, and well, your story is as inspiring as your work. So thank you for sharing it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
One thing
Yes.
that I was thinking about when they say that it was better to don't type, don't know how to type in, yeah, that it's like, yeah, but
Well, it was the very early 70s. I
yeah,
mean, I sort of recall it was like 72 or 73, somewhere around that time.
yeah,
And, you know, women were not really in the industry,
yeah,
not in technical positions by any means,
yeah,
or
but
stretch of the imagination. And and so, you know, when I decided I wanted to move into audio,
hmm,
I just I I've always been a bit of a rebel. I just never listened. I just went, oh yeah, okay, well, we'll see what happens. And just kind of went about my merry way. And then in 1976, I decided to move to Los Angeles. I also did some live sound while I was in Boston. I worked at the jazz workshop Pulse Mall doing live sound, and that was great because I met some incredible people. Did a lot of work with some major acts, and then in 76 decided to move out to Los Angeles and moved here not knowing anybody, knowing one or two people, but not really knowing anybody in the industry, and proceeded to go to as many recording studios as I could in a day
hmm,
and drop off my resume. And I knew that I would not be accepted as an engineer, but I knew that I'd have to be an assistant engineer when I got here. So I worked into that mode of being an assistant engineer.
yeah,
And um, some of the studios, I got a number of callbacks from studios,
which
um,
studios,
Cher- Cherokee
yeah,
Studios, and actually Cherokee and what other one? There was another one, and Larrabee Studios.
hmm,
And it just so happened that Larrabee called me back, and they wanted me to go up and meet their chief tech, who was a guy named Bob Stone. And basically everybody that ever went up to him, male or female, came down in tears because he was just impossible. But
yeah,
I came down and I was still smiling.
yeah,
And so we sort of hit it off. So, you know, he said, okay, we're going to think about it. And I said, okay. And then a client of mine from Boston got a record deal with Capitol. And they called me and they said, hey, we need a recording done. We've got $3,000 from Capitol to do these demos of a couple of songs because we have the other songs that you recorded when we were in Boston. Do you know any place that we can do it with you? So I happened to call up Jackie Mills at Larrabee Studios and say, I have this situation. One of my clients from Boston just got a deal with Capitol Records. And they want me to record the demos here in LA. They only have $3,000, but I was wondering, is there any way that I could maybe use one of the studios? And he said, sure, bring it on. Excuse me. I was totally surprised. He basically wanted to see how I operated. So we went into one of the smaller rooms, and Tavi Mote, who's passed away, but he was one of the engineers there, and he was my assistant. I hadn't worked on that console before, but it was a console, and I had definitely, in Boston, we did have somebody join the studio that brought along a console with them. Lucky us. So I did understand the workings of a console and monitor systems and all that. So I set up the whole room, excuse me, set
okay,
up the mics, and recorded the session with Tavi's help. I mean, he helped me just figure out how to get myself situated because there was no muscle memory, of course, on this console. Did the whole session, did 3 days, finished it up. At the end, he told Jackie, she doesn't need me, she could run the session. So he calls me up the next night. He said, could you come over to the studio? And I said, okay. And he takes me out to the parking lot, and his hands were filled with a bunch of things. And he hands me a hat and a t-shirt and a set of keys. And he said, you know, if a girl's going to make it in this business, she better be from New York and have some balls. And you've got New York and balls in you. So welcome to the family.
Oh, that's amazing. Wow. We are with David, like hearing you, and it's fascinating all the things that you have said,
I think
and we are imagining all the. Do you have books? Have you ever? Uh, have you write a book? A book?
no,
Sorry,
no,
no.
no,
You have
no. I
to.
know. I just tell the stories.
You have to.
but but that was sort of the beginning, and I stayed with Larrabee for a bunch of years until actually I went to ABC Studios for a while. They wanted me over there, and then Larrabee kind of brought me back. One of the things that I was capable of doing that nobody else was capable of doing was reading a score. And at the time, they were doing a lot of Donna Summer and disco albums. And one of the composers came in and said, "Do you have anybody that can read a score? I need somebody who can be punching in." This was on Studer machines, punching in and out and not screw up anything. And they said, "Yeah, actually, we do." And so they brought me in. And they said, "Can you read a score?" I said, "Yeah, just show me what you want." I said, "Circle and pencil all the areas you want and what tracks you want them on, strings or, rhythm or whatever." And they did. And I was punching in and out, reading the score on the tracks that were needed. So that kind of elevated my stock quite a lot.
Yeah.
And at the time also, I was assisting for Bruce Botnick when he was still an engineer, or producing and engineering. And so I did a number of things with him. I was doing a lot of different things. I was assisting. I was also doing a lot of Motown demos. And then at one point, I started working with Jack Nitzsche on an album, and there was we were working with another mixer up in San Francisco. He came down to do I think it was the Michelle Phillips album, and he had to go. It was running late, and he had to go up north to start another album. So he told Jack to let me do the overdubs. Said, "You could do the overdubs. She's no problem. Then I'll come down and mix it." And I said, "Fine." So I did the overdubs. Well, Jack walked in a couple of months later with the album cover, and on the back, it was my first engineering credit. It didn't have me as an assistant engineer. It said, "Girl engineer, Sherry Klein, boy engineer, Kim King."
Girl engineer.
Yeah. And I just went, "Oh my God, that's so cool." Because it was just my first engineering, not assistant credit,
Yeah.
And then, God, I started working with, when I was working with Bruce, he was also producing the Cal Jam tapes from the Cal Jam thing, Woodstock type thing that happened out here way back when. And so they decided to do all the album work for it at Larrabee. So they basically booked out Larrabee, both studios. And at that point, I believe we had the SSL in one room and an API in the other room. And it was total recall.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, recall, not reset. Reset is, different than the automation we have today, but recall where, like I took pictures of everything and set it all up, and the faders would come up and go down and all that. But the other stuff I needed to, kind of set to pictures and stuff, or to null points.
Hey,
But
for our audience, can you tell us more about that? What is the recall? But maybe with
recall, when it-
with an example, because
Okay.
it's amazing.
When SSL first came out, it was total recall, as opposed to today where everything resets because everything is digital. So there was a certain amount of analog involved with it. So the faders would move up and down, but you had to reset the pots, if I remember correctly, to a null spot, or take pictures and then, reset the pots that way. So it was kind of involved getting it all back, because it wasn't totally digital at that point.
Yeah,
And you were still dealing with multi-tracks being sunk together through channel 24 of the multi-tracks. And if you lifted up the fader, it was, you heard that horrible
So you
sound.
have to take pictures, but in
Or write
the
it down,
yeah,
longhand.
yeah, because if you take a picture, you have to go to the store and yeah, wait like one week. There's no digital pictures.
No, I'm trying to remember. At that point, yeah, there weren't cell phones. How did we do that? We took pictures, or I would draw it myself. I think I would draw. We had layouts or something, and I would draw it myself, and I'd put the lines where they needed to be, something to that effect. But we did have to reset a certain amount of the console. But anyway, getting back to Bruce, he brought in the Cal Jam tapes, and he brought in Andy Johns to do the mixing and recording and all that stuff. And the studio decided to put me, well, no, Bruce asked for me to be the assistant on it and to help him. Now you have to understand, we were going to be locked in the studio for a week, into 2 studios. They were bringing food in. The only time we could go home was to shower every couple of days, but we were sleeping there. It was going to be something like that. Okay, because this was 24 hours. In Studio A, people were coming in and recording, and in Studio B, and then in Studio A, the mixing was taking place.
A lot of work.
Okay. And there was food everywhere. I mean, they catered everything to the tens. And so there was a little bit of a stumbling point in that Andy was very British. And the thought of having a woman as that second person was not something that we knew he would take to very well.
Yeah.
And I remember Jackie calling me up, and he said, "Look, this is going to be an issue for Andy, and Bruce knows it too. So we're using your nickname." They used to use the nickname of Shay sometimes when we didn't want a producer to know that I was a woman. So he said, "We've been using the name Shay as the assistant. So when I want you to gather every curse word, every 4-letter word that you know, so that if I look at you in a certain direction, you just can spit it all out." And I went, "Are you serious?" And he's like, "Yeah, trust me." I said, "Okay." So the next day I walk into the studio, and Jackie calls me in the office, and he says, "Andy's going to be here in a minute. Sit down." So I sit down. Andy walks in. Okay, I'm sitting there. And he goes, "Andy, this is Sherry. She'll be working with you. Her nickname is Shay. You can call her whichever." And the look on his face was like, and he's just started walking around the office, very small office, but like pacing the office going, "You're locking me into the studios with a bird, with a bird." It was like he was just incensed that I was going to be the second person with him. And Jackie said, "Andy, sit down, calm down." And he looked at me and he said, "Sherry," and I just started spouting out curse words and just, basically blowing his mind, because I think what he was afraid of was that he'd have to watch his manners or watch what he said. And with me in the room, he wouldn't be able to be himself. Well, I dispelled that immediately. And Jackie immediately looked at Andy, who kind of had his eyebrows raised, and went, "Are we good now?" And Andy went, "Okay, let's go." And then we went into the rooms and we started. And for a week, there were times that I would mix, there were times that he would mix. He'd sleep on the couch, I'd sleep on the couch. We'd have other people recording and overdubbing. It was a fantastic experience, especially watching him. That was amazing. And we had all kinds of guest artists come in. And then Andy was doing an album at United Western shortly after with, who was it with? Was it with the Stones? Or forgot who it was, but it was a major group, and he invited me down to watch.
Yeah.
And that was fantastic too. So, those years were some of the best years of my career and best years of my life. I mean, the people that I met and that I got to work with and that I got to learn from, that I got to absorb from, was incredible.
And how did you get into post-production? Yeah.
That's another crazy story. All of a sudden, I worked on this album with an engineer. I worked on a couple of albums with him, and and we had a great time, and he really liked me, and he really appreciated what I was able to put into the show, into the album. And so he called, this was probably 1980, wait, 1983, 81, somewhere around when the whole payola thing kind of came about in the States. And the record industry kind of went to hell. It just, all the major labels, so many of the major labels went under and closed down. In fact, a number of them went under owing me money for albums that I had done. So he calls me up one afternoon and says, "Hey, listen, I'm taking a vacation this summer and I'm working at this local TV station, KTTV, and I need somebody to replace me." He said, "So you know the equipment, you know how to align machines, you know how to take care of, mixing." He said, "The only thing you don't know how to do is deal with time code." And I said, "Oh, that horrible thing that when you lift up channel 24 of the multi-tracks?" And he said, "Oh, it's a lot more than that." He said, "I can show you in an afternoon." I said, "Fine." So I went over there, and they were dealing with a CMX as their synchronizer. These were in the days before Q-Lock and the days before BTX Soft Touch, all of the things that people were using eventually to sync and lock picture to sound. And so I went over there, and he showed me everything. And he said, "Do it for the summer, and then I'll come back." And I said, "Okay." And so, trial by fire, the first show that I did with at KTTV was a show called Three's Company, which at that time was the biggest, one of the first big sitcoms in the States.
Yeah, and,
So-
and here in Colombia too. I remember when I was a child watching the Spanish version, is Tres
Of Three's
Compañía.
Company?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I remember
Okay, well,
that.
that was my first show.
Wow,
That was the show that I
that's
went in to
amazing.
mix, having never really mixed before anything in post-production with picture and sound.
Yeah,
Okay. And there was a guy next to me who was doing the laugh tracks. And that was the start of it. And at the end of the summer, he came back and he said, "So my family and I decided we're going to move to Orlando, Florida. And I'm going to go work at Disney World. So if you want us to keep working, hang in there." And I'm like, "Okay, why not?" Because the record industry was really light at that point. It was very hard to find gigs. The crazy thing is, anytime that I found a music gig, I would like immediately take it and leave post for a while. I would go back and forth. I kept the day job at KTTV, but then I would always do the album work as well. So I found myself really gravitating towards music, but interested about post because it was just going from 2-inch tape to 1-inch tape, 1-inch videotape. We're just going from mono into stereo. So things were just starting to happen, and things were just starting to get interesting also. So after that, I took on a job doing a children's show by day and a Playboy Channel show by night at two different facilities. And one was a magazine format type show, and the other was the Playboy show, and then the children's show that came in after a while. And I did that for like a year or two until a studio, my first post-production studio, I guess you could say, EFX Systems, opened up in Burbank. And they were transitioning from a recording studio, into a post-production studio. And they were really interested in me because I could do both. So I ended up going to work for them. And at that time I was, it was a sweetening engineer. You did dialogue, music, and effects. You cut, you use the synclavier. The synclavier wasn't there. It was the emulator at that point. That was the only digital thing that we had. It was analog and it was digital. You were combining, you were sort of between both worlds. And the owner, George Johnson, was awesome because he had the foresight to eventually, years later, go into a deal with DigiDesign, which now Avid, And we got the first batch of post-pros and synclaviers, and from there it just goes on and on and on.
Wow, Sherry, your story is so inspiring, and like I said, we are like hearing you, and I'm like imagining all these situations. But
There's one thing I
tell me,
left out, and I'm only going to mention it because it was pivotal in my recording career. Was I also worked as an assistant engineer on the Runaways, and therefore I met a guy named Kim Fowley, who was the producer. And I also assisted when Kim Fowley was the producer for Helen Reddy and a few other albums. Kim was the one who first plucked me out of being an assistant, aside from the Jack Nitzsche album, but plucked me out and said, I'm going to do an album for Epic with an all-girl band called the Orchids, and I'd like you to do the engineering, the mixing. Are you ready? And I said yes. And I ended up doing that album as well as 6 or 7 other albums with him
yeah,
before getting into the post-production end of things. That was sort of like right before I moved into that.
well, it's amazing. So, from musician to engineer, recording music, and now post production, right?
Yeah.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah. Well, David is telling me that we have some questions from you. I am watching them right now on YouTube. We have. Oh, tell us, David, please.
Yeah, we do. We do have a lot of questions. I hope you have a little bit more time because we do have
Yeah.
we do have a lot of them.
That's great.
So we have first of all greetings from Daniela Dominguez. Sherry, missing you in Bogota. Please come back soon. Is saying Daniela. We have greetings from Francisco Escobar as well. And he's asking, when you listen to the final DX, you talk about the result with the project producer or the record or the ADR.
Okay, that's a loaded question because I'm going to talk post-production. Okay.
Yeah.
The final product of the dialogue, ADR, music, effects, the producer is always with us on stage, or well, not always with us. They usually give us a day or two to mix. My partner and I, my partner who does the effects. The last partner I had was Scott Weber, and we worked together for about 7 years. And he works the effects, and I work the dialogue and music. He works effects and Foley. Normally, the way that we would work would be I would be in the studio on day 1, pre-dubbing dialogue and music. And he would be at home because he has a 5.1 studio, or he has, I think, an Atmos at this stage studio at home, and he would work the sound effects and Foley to the rough guide track. At the end of the day, I would send him a rough copy of my stems for dialogue and music, and then he would put it together, and then he'd come in the next morning and we'd put it all together. Everything he worked on at home, plus what I worked on in the studio. We'd work that with the associate producer, usually during the morning hours, possibly the whole rest of the day. And then the next day, if we had 3 days mixing, the 3rd day, the producers would come in. And then they hear it. And whatever changes they want, we work on, be it ADR, be it dialogue, be it music. I mean, they have the final say. There are many times where we will say, we don't necessarily agree with what you're asking us to do, but let's do it and see if it works. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes they ask us to go back to what we had. It's a collaborative process. When I first get the dialogue, I get it from my dialogue editor, and hopefully that person, he or she, has had a chance to go through it and smooth things out and give it to me in a form so that I'm not chasing my faders and a certain amount of the work has been done. Not all, but a certain amount. If I know the editor, I give them more latitude. If I don't know the editor, then I'd rather do it myself in terms of cleanup. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, yeah, so clear. Thank you, David. We have more questions, right, David?
Yeah, we have another question. What tells you when a mix is finally done? How do you keep dialogue clarity without losing emotional impact? That's two questions in one.
Okay, how do we know when a mix is done? When the producer's happy with it?
Okay.
Honestly, because as far as we're concerned, many times right before they walk in the door, we're done. We've done it. We've done our best. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the producers are 100% with it. They might want more music in places, less music. They might see a scene a certain different way. After you've worked with a producer for years and years, or on a show for years and years, you kind of know what they want. So you kind of have their ears. You know, you know what they're looking for. When you're starting a new show, sometimes it takes time to develop that ear of the producer and the people that you're working with. And as far as the dialogue and the clarity, I always say the greatest tool that we have is our ears. I don't care what tools you have in your toolbox to clean things up, to EQ, compress, do whatever. If you don't have the ears, it's not going to help you.
Yeah.
Okay, that's one of the first things that I tell my dialogue editors. I go, if it sounds right to you, then give it to me. And if it doesn't sound right to me, I'll tell you how to make it right for me. Every mixer hears differently.
Yeah,
Just like there's
sure.
no two templates in Pro Tools that are the same. Everybody does things their own way. And everybody hears different. Women hear different than men. That's long known. We all hear differently.
Yeah.
And so what I hear and what makes me feel like my dialogue is audible and is getting where I want it to be is just something I know.
Yeah, and do you test the audio in TVs, in I don't know, speakers, in how many?
Yeah, we've been normally on most of the shows I was working on, we mix in 5.1
Yeah.
and then we put it down to the fold down on the two channel. And usually it's either a pair of Yamahas or, small speakers, anything small speakers.
Yeah.
Not Oratones, that was for music, but, a set of Gentle X, whatever. But we always mixed on the 5.1s on the big speakers. And then we would always check things. I mean, many times when I was mixing music, I would check it on the smalls before and then put it back up on the bigs. And when we were, starting with COVID, a lot of the producers didn't come to the stage anymore, which was a drag because we really missed seeing them and hanging with them. But they were on, Zoom and Clearview. And many times it would be like, the music is just too low. What are you listening on? Oh, your laptop. Okay, that's not going to work. Understand? Okay, we had to find out how they were listening. We had one producer on one of my shows who kept his speakers under his desk. And he kept saying, Sherry, the dialogue just sounds really murky to me. Well, his speakers were under the desk and he was sitting up here.
It's amazing.
But when we finally got him up,
Yeah.
everything was cool. So, there were many times where they just said, we trust you. We've done this show with you for 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
We trust you. But those are the kind of things you have to go through. I mean, even headphones, a good pair of headphones, the backgrounds are too loud. No, they're not too loud. It's just that you're wearing headphones. When you put them on speakers, they're going to fall away. And when they air, it's really going to fall away.
Yeah, they are different ways to hear, and yeah, I understand.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, that's a good trick. Thank you, Sherry. Well, we have more questions for
Okay.
Yeah, Francisco Escobar, Iron Ears, is telling you thank you so much for your answer. We have another question from Diego. Hi, Sherry. How do you
Hi.
approach challenges like noisy dialogue or inconsistent location recordings?
Oh, that's every show.
That's your life.
There are two ways that I approach it. I mean, I have a certain amount of tools that I rely on. Some, I mean, everybody uses RX. I use RX. Hush Pro is another favorite. Abstensia is another favorite plugin. There's a lot of plugins out there, but the first thing that I do is I look at the scene, first of all. And one of the things that I tell my editors, if your signal to noise is good and your dialogue is actually rich and it's upfront and you have noise in the track, examine what the noise is, because you don't need to clean all the noise out if you're on an exterior. I've had so many people that have cleaned the dialogue and we're out on a New York City street, or we're, like out on railroad tracks or something. And it's like, why did you clean it so much? It's like, we're just going to add that back in. It's like, let the dialogue live. Decide, I decide how much is necessary to clean. I don't, cedar also. The cedar is my go-to always, because it's gentle and, it gets out a lot of that low rumble without killing the sound. Anything that you do too much is going to suck or pump or whatever. So you kind of have to approach each thing differently. Another thing, I don't like to batch process. I will go through a scene, and if I have to, I will process each individual waveform differently, because they were shot at different angles at different times of the day, maybe different days. And so, yes, there's a difference in the background, but hopefully a good editor will give you enough ramp, enough, so you can layer on top of, you're not cutting, and then laying a stupid piece of fill that doesn't even match. If you've got, I always say that my dialogue editor is like a cinematographer to an actor. Okay. They make you look good. And if you don't have a good editor, you're not going to look as good, because you're too busy making shit shine instead of making whatever you're dealing with as rich and as full as you can, and working on your actual show, being able to put your creative input into that. So, I approach every scene differently, different EQs. It just depends. There's no golden rule. There's no set rule, and as I said before, every mixer's template is different, and we all think of it differently. I mean, I most of my dialogue is mono, okay, and it goes through a chain. That's a mono dialogue chain. And if I need to pan my dialogue, I have 3 or 4 tracks that are stereo, or whatever tracks that are pan tracks, and I will put what's needed in those tracks. But it's rare that my dialogue is, flailing about the room. My walla might be, or my ADR, and sometimes, some cases, but my main dialogue is usually pretty much centered. So early in my career, I got burnt using a stereo track, and I was a little bit off to the right, a little off axis on the pan, and all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, no, I need to keep a mono track and allow for stereo imaging when I need to. So I have my stuff going, and I'm very light on it. I mean, I have an EQ and a de-esser on my tracks. I have a compressor on my chain. I have my cedar on my chain. I have other things that I keep in bypass, but they're available to me. Graphic EQ, soothe, a few other things. I try to stay as minimal as I can and rely on equalization and my ears to get me where I need to go.
Yeah. Hey, Sherry, let's think about your beginnings. I think that it was harder to work with the tools that you have in of course, right? The plugins are
Yes.
amazing for you.
Yeah, I mean, when I started, after I left EFX, I went to work for Sony, and I had a dubbing stage there, and they were not digital yet. We were still totally analog. So I was dealing with patch bays and I was dealing with black boxes, patching the old Uri peaker dippers and, for notch filters, and everything was ultra harmonizer 3000, for some of my matching reverb stuff. But again, the equipment, all this newfangled, all this great new equipment is wonderful, but it still comes down to, and I always say this, your ears. It always comes down to, if you hear, you just keep going for what's in your mind's ear, like mind's eye. An artist, or a photographer is looking for what's in his mind's eye. Well, it's the same thing with your ears. You're constantly going for, like when I'm matching ADR, I may not have all the equipment I need, but I will keep fucking with it until I get what's in my mind's ear. Because I'm a musician, I know rhythm and I know pitch. And I know that a lot of times I can get in and out of ADR if I can get in on the right pitch and out on the right pitch. And then somewhere in the middle, I can make it work. Sync's easy once you have the rhythm. You just don't want it to sound like What's Up, Tiger Lily, an old Woody Allen movie. You want everything to flow. You don't want to feel like you're all of a sudden, oh, that was ADR. And that's every mixer's worst fear, is that the ADR is bad. And sometimes it is bad. Sometimes it's just bad. So you do everything you can. And some of the equipment that we have today allows you to bend and pitch correct and change things so that you can. But when you didn't have that stuff, when I didn't have that stuff, I managed somehow, whether it was going in back and recording certain things and cutting tape, literally cutting tape and running it over the heads 5 or 6 times to smooth it out, and then having it sync up and run and put into my analog tracks that I was running. So the equipment gets you there and it helps you, but you just keep going till you get what you want. And let me tell you, there are many times where the producer or my partner, I'll turn to my partner and I'll go, what do you think of this? And he'll go, it sounds great. And I'll go, okay, that means I have to stop and move on. Because I'll just keep working on it until it sounds right to me. And a lot of times when I go back to it, when we go into playback and I hear what I did back and the thing he said was okay, all of a sudden I know exactly what I can do to give it what I want so that I'm making it right for me. And I go and I do it, takes a second. Sometimes you just need space from things.
Yeah, well, thank you for all your knowledge and your stories. David has another question for you from Felipe Prieto. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's asking how it's your process to put dialogue in real sync. He's talking about lip sync. How do you do the lip sync of the audio and the video?
Well, it's done with time code. He could be a little more specific. In other words, how do you, are you talking about lip sync? Or are you talking about ADR? I mean, syncing audio to video with time code, that's a whole nother discussion and a whole different area. That's a whole different technical thing. I'm not sure exactly what he's talking about or asking me.
That's all the information I have as well. He says he's talking about lip sync though.
But he has another question for you.
He has another question, yeah.
Okay.
Do you prefer mixing in headphones or speakers?
Speakers. Okay, I'm one of those people that has an affliction. I can't wear headphones, and this has been for years, since I was a music engineer. I can't wear headphones for more than, I think maximum 6 to 8 minutes before I start getting pressure pains. So I can't mix in headphones. I can mix in ear pods, but they're no good. They're not good enough. No, I can't mix in headphones. Never could and never will. I prefer speakers no matter what.
Sherry,
Great.
and which speakers do you use?
At home, I have a pair of JBL 305Ps, Mark IIs. That's what I have in Mexico at my place, and that's what I have here. They just work. And they're the closest to what I have in most of the studios, which are JBL based systems. So they sound familiar to me right out of the box. And then a friend came over and tuned them a while ago, but we've since moved things around. So probably not quite tuned yet, but they're near field, they're close to me. So anything that I've done, any pre-dubbing I've done on them has been close enough so that when I bring it into the studio, it's minor tweaks.
Okay, cool, cool. Well, we're running out of time, but we have another question. I think this is the last question from
Okay.
Francisco Escobar, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Francisco is asking any tip to learn to make an orchestral music album and not over process the result. Like he's
Give
asking
me
for
that
tips.
one more time. Anything to learn? Give me that again.
How to mix orchestral music and not over process the result.
I probably would not be the person to ask because I haven't done orchestral music in an awfully long time. I did a lot of scoring dates during those years when things were kind of slow in the music industry, but we didn't even have the kind of processing you're talking about back then. Again, I'm going to say the same thing. Rely on your ears. Orchestral music, if it's mic'd correctly, shouldn't need a ton of processing. At least that's my thought. I would say, rely on your ears. Again, I can never tell somebody what is too much processing for something that's not right in front of me. I mean, if I hear something and they ask if this is over processed, I can say yes or no. But to just talk in generalities, how do you not over process an orchestra, an album, dialogue, music? I can't, because every situation is its own situation and needs to be treated as such. There is no general rule except what's governed by your ears. That's the ultimate governing rule.
Okay, well, yeah, I think mixing like the whole show, it's difficult, I guess, and you have to think in the people who is watching, and yeah, and that they can hear all the details, but the message is so important.
Yeah.
Hey, Sherry, Chilito says hi, yeah? Yeah, he was quite
Hopefully
good to
I'll
me.
see him this weekend.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Not
but
funny.
I remember the in the promo that we post the
I had a
Instagram
picture of me
reel.
and him.
Yeah, there's a
Right.
picture of you and Chilitos. That's right. That's right. Well, I have a question. So, are you going to Pan American Audio Educators Conference, right?
I am definitely going to the Pan American Audio Educators Conference for sure. I've already made my reservation to be able to fly in on time so that I will be able to be part of all the activities this year.
That's great. Last time was amazing, huh? And
It was incredible, and I got sick through it, so this year I'm definitely going to be healthy. But I look forward to a lot of the events and to talking with a lot of the educators and exchanging ideas. It's a fantastic thing. I'm so glad. I'm so glad it's happening again, especially with last year's in the back. Being able to look forward to the next one. It's each year. I'm sure it's going to get better and better. It's just a fantastic experience.
yeah, it was fantastic. And you speak Spanish, right, Sherry?
Okay, poco a poco.
Poco, poco.
I am learning. I'm studying because I am moving to Mexico. And as we know, as you can see in the back of me, there are boxes that are all being shipped down, gear and everything. But I live in Chiapas, in San Cristobal de las Casas. And so I will be spending most of my time there and in Mexico.
That's cool. Well, we can teach you when you want it. You can practice with us.
Oh,
¿Cierto?
I have a professor. I have somebody who I'm studying with, and I'm getting there, little by little.
That's cool. That's cool.
But I do understand. I do understand.
Ok, so nosotros podemos hablar en español Desde ese momento, perfecto. We can make the live stream in 2 languages. And,
Fantastic.
yeah, so, David, ¿qué sigue de nuestras promociones?
So yeah, remember that next year, the 18th and the 20th of April, is going to take place the Pan American Audio Educators Conference, which is run currently with Soundcheck Expo as well. An amazing event. We actually went last year and it was such an amazing experience. This is part of the video that we released about this event. And well, it's incredible. Yeah, you're gonna be able to talk with a lot of educators about curricula, about a lot of things, and you're gonna be able to meet with technology specialists and developers. So don't miss it, it's amazing. We also recommend attending to the Soundcheck Expo, where you're gonna be able to know the new technology about products, music, production, recording. It's an amazing experience as well. So both events are gonna take place at the same time and on the same place. So don't miss the Soundcheck Expo. I'm just gonna let you be invited by Miles Fullwider.
Hi, this is Miles Fullwider, and I'm inviting all of you audio educators to come and join us at the Pan American Audio Educators Conference held in Mexico City beginning April 18th. This is a wonderful event where audio educators come from all over the world to share ideas, pedagogy, methodologies, talking about audio education and engaging students and sharing ideas and collaborating with our colleagues. It's an incredible experience, and one of the best things as well is it also runs alongside the Soundcheck Expo show happening in Mexico City. So come, join us, and we look forward to seeing you there.
Also, remember that this episode is actually going to become a podcast, and you will be able to re-listen to all these amazing stories from Sherry just by searching Produciendo con Julio Monroy in each platform on which you listen to podcasts. It could be Spotify, Apple Podcast, and you'll be able to find this episode and all past episodes as well. Also, remember to join our Discord server where we can actually discuss about audio. You can send us your productions, your music, your compositions, and we can all share and talk about software and hardware and, well, everything about audio. So please be sure to join our Discord. The QR code is going to appear in a minute. That's the QR.
That's great. Thank you, David. Well, that's amazing. Sherry, we have run out of time, but we have the last question for you. And
Okay.
it's very important, this question, because based in your experience, in your life, in your history, which advice would you give to the women that would like to involve in audio industry?
I think I would give the advice that I would give to anyone, and maybe in some ways a little bit more with women. Since I started, things have moved along. There's a lot more women mixers, editors, sound designers. There are so many more women than when I started, and now it's not unheard of. And at least in the US, we need more, but we definitely have a lot of women coming up in this new group of audio people. I say just be persistent. You're going to get a lot of no's and a lot of people saying we don't need anybody. Keep going, keep trying, be persistent. If you know that you have the passion to be in this industry and do what you want to do, don't let up. I'm not saying be a pain in the neck, but I do say don't just send your resume, go there, bring your resume. You might meet somebody. Try to join organizations. Soundgirls.org is a great organization. The Cinema Audio Society is international. The MPSE, Motion Picture Sound Editors. Cinema Audio Society is, a fantastic group of people, and they have, for students, for audio educators, there are different positions, different realms. You can meet people through networking, even online, and going to these events. The main thing is don't just stay in your little cubbyhole and send out resumes and think that that's going to do it. You've got to network. This is a networking industry, whether you're in Mexico or whether you're in the US or anywhere in the world. You have to get to know people, and things just happen when you work towards it.
That's great. Great advice. Network is so important. Yeah, I met you this year at the Pan American Audio Educators Conference, and yeah, the network is very important. Sherry, thanks a lot. It was amazing to talk with
It
you.
was my pleasure. My pleasure. Look
Thank-
forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks a lot, and thanks, David Sicar, for all your support, the controls, and everything, my friend.
No, thanks, David.
My pleasure, Sherry. It was amazing talking to you again because we also met at the Pan American Audio Educators Conference. And thank you a lot for taking the time to chat with us and tell us all these amazing stories. You should actually publish a book. Like, that's such an amazing
Yeah,
story.
yeah.
You definitely have to do it.
Yeah,
And
please.
thank you, Julio, for creating these amazing spaces as well. So, well, this was the episode. Thanks to all the people that connected, that sent us questions. Francisco Escobar is actually telling us,
Thank you.
muchas gracias, Sherry, un abrazo. He's telling you.
All right.
Okay, so, well, thanks to all, and I leave you now with Julio Monroy.
Well, thank you, everyone. It was amazing to talk with Sherry. And next week, we are going to talk with Raúl Bustos. He's going to create a training episode for students who wants to involve in ear training and everything. It's going to be great. So see you next week. Bye.